Okay, so you've learned the basics of calligraphy. You know how to do the basic strokes. You know how to put those basic strokes together into an alphabet. You can write some words. Your stuff looks good and you're pretty happy with it. Side note, if what I just said doesn't describe you and you've skipped any of those steps, specifically if you've skipped the basic strokes and you want to just be here and jump into doing some fancy stylized calligraphy, get out of here. I'm just kidding. You don't have to get out of here. You're welcome here, but I truly need you to slow your roll for like a second. You're welcome to watch this video through, but I need you to please go to showmeyourdrills.com and take my free basics course before you attempt any of this more advanced stuff. I promise you're gonna be glad you did it in that order. But for the rest of you, yeah, if you've got a good looking calligraphy skill so far, but it's starting to feel a little bit vanilla, I guess, or basic or boring, it looks kind of like everyone else's basic alphabet, then this is a really good place to start, because in this video, I'm going to give you 3 specific places you can experiment with your letters and your words that's instantly going to change the look of them. And then I'm going to tell you exactly how to start incorporating those into your style permanently. All right, so here's my super basic alphabet. No stylistic choices, just your basic, made of basic strokes kind of alphabet, so we have a comparison to start with. And for the record, if you're seeing this and you're wondering what I am using, then that also might mean that you're jumping ahead, because if you've learned the basics, you would know that I'm using Rhodia paper and a Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen. And if those terms or those materials are foreign to you, then I really want you to go take my free basics course, because in there we talk about all of the basic supplies and recommendations and everything you need to know as a beginner. So if you're here and you don't actually know any of these tools that I'm using, that's probably a better place to start. So I'm going to link to that down below. But for now, yeah, here's my super basic alphabet. Now let's get into the 3 places that I recommend you start tweaking those letters. The first place to start tweaking that is very, very simple is to play with the loops on your alphabet. The ascenders, the descenders, and even places like your O and your V and your W, I'm going to show you how to play with those. So the really obvious place to start is with the ascenders and the descenders. So where my original B looked like this, and I'm going to do these kind of quickly so we're not here forever. My stylized B that I'm starting to play with could have a much bigger loop. And if all else is the same, you can totally see how that immediately changes the look of your letter. Same thing with the letter D. We could do everything else the same, but play with the size of that loop. So any letter with an ascender or a descender is a really easy place to start experimenting. And when you're starting, you could get so exaggerated with this and then really start to kind of pare it back. So at the beginning, when you're just playing, just experiment with really big ones. And then also you could try really small ones. So let's go back to that letter B. Maybe instead of a really big ascender, maybe I'm doing a really narrow one and making it sort of more condensed looking. Or maybe on, let's say, the letter D again, maybe for this one, I want to experiment with trying to not have a loop at all. Maybe it's just a straight line. There are no rules here, so you can play with making your loops really big, really small, or non-existent altogether. Now we can talk about letters like O, V, W, R, S. All of those have some version of a loop, or they could. So my original O looks like this. Maybe my stylized O looks like this. Or maybe it's got even bigger of a loop. Maybe it's like a huge stylized O. That's a really, really common one and a really simple one that people tend to experiment with really early on. And it makes a big difference in how free your lettering looks. So that's the letter O. If we want to talk about letters like V and W, so for reference, my original V looks like this. So these all have what we call the comma dot. So maybe now for your letter V, you add a loop at the top like this. So again, it's still playing with loops, and maybe you could do a smaller one. Same thing with the W. If my original W, and again, I'm doing this too fast, but if my original W has that comma dot, maybe now instead I put a loop at the end. And we just start to kind of add on things like that. And so when you're first getting started with trying to stylize your letters, I want you to fill a page with stuff like this, just playing with bigger loops, smaller loops, non-existent loops, and trying to get a feel for what you like and what you don't like. Let's do a couple more. I just want to show you R and S really quick. So if my original R looked like this, maybe my loopy R has a loop at the top like that. Maybe if my original S is like this, maybe my next S has a loop at the top. So all sorts of places like that you can start to add stylization. So that's number one, play with the loops. If I were to take my original alphabet now and do just playing with the loops, it might look something like this. So really quick, if you compare these, you can see that this one looks already a lot more bouncy, a lot more free form than this more structured one did. And that's not to say that this is an alphabet that I necessarily am obsessed with. I think there are places for improvement here, and it's not just those loops that we should play with if we're trying to stylize. But when you look at an alphabet like this compared to this one, you can quickly see how one little tweak can make a huge difference to your alphabet. Okay, for tweak number 2, we are playing with spacing. So this time we're gonna work on stretching our letters out and compressing our letters and seeing how different that can look. So I'm just gonna do this right away with my entire alphabet all put together. So if we have our original right here for reference, I'm gonna show you what it can look like if we stretch it and what it can look like if we condense it. And these, again, are gonna be really exaggerated so that we can really see how different it can be. And then once you've exaggerated it, you can start to pare it back to a point that you actually really like. So let's do a really exaggerated stretched one first. So you'll notice that my basic strokes are still the same, but I'm stretching the connection between the letters. I'm keeping the sizing consistent, I'm keeping the strokes consistent. Everything else is created equal, but we're changing the spacing, and that can completely change the style of your letters. Again, I'm doing this pretty quick because I don't want to be here for too long, but I do want to be able to show you the difference in the full alphabet when you do stuff like this. Okay, so again, really quickly, you can see how different that is just from stretching. So now let's try it compressed instead. I should say this. On the first one, I stretched, and I stretched just the spacing between the letters. Maybe some of the letters got stretched a little bit in the process. In condensing, you can do that with the spacing, or you can also do that with the letters. So I'll demonstrate what I mean in that. So my A, usually the oval on my A is quite round, but if I'm condensing, maybe I would play with making my ovals all a little bit more narrow and my spacing a little bit more narrow. And things tend to just get like a little more up and down when I'm condensing. This tends to give it like kind of a bolder look. But like you can tell as I'm doing this that the basic strokes remain intact. I'm really just changing the angles of things, the spacing of things, and kind of like how squished or how wide they are. But truly that alphabet is the same alphabet as the first one you started with. Okay. So here we have our regular alphabet, our stretched alphabet, our condensed alphabet. So that is tweak number 2, play with the stretch and play with the condensation. That doesn't feel like the right word here. Condensedness? No, that's definitely not it. Stretch your letters and condense your letters. We'll just say that. And tweak number 3 is to play with the connections of your letters. So when I say the connections of your letters and starting to play with those, the one that comes to my head the most is the letter TH. And I remember this so clearly because when I was first starting to start playing with my letters and stylizing my letters, this was one of the very first things I put in. And I realized how much of a difference a tiny tweak could make in how stylized your letters look. So I'm going to give you an example. Because T and H are not directly beside each other in an alphabet, I'm going to actually just show it to you separately. So if I lettered the word with my normal TH, it might look something like this, which feels pretty, despite my loopy W, it feels pretty formal. One of the quickest, most fun ways I learned to stylize really quick, you do the bar of your T and you bring it up to where you should start your H, but now you're going to come off to the side and add this flourish that connects, it crosses your T and creates the downstroke on your H. This is a pretty advanced move. This is a flourish, which is another whole conversation we could have later. But when you start to see letters like that, especially ones that have two ascenders beside each other or two descenders beside each other, if you can figure out how to connect them, those things can make a world of difference. So that's a really good example. I challenge you to practice doing TH like that and see if it can kind of make your lettering look a little bit more fun to you. And then another thing that you can play with in terms of connections is to actually omit some of the connections. So let's go back and do an alphabet in this style, and I'm going to show you what I mean. So sometimes, if you look at this alphabet, we see every letter is connected to each other. But every once in a while, you can play with not connecting a letter and just keeping the spacing intact. So if I were to do that for an entire alphabet, I'm going to show you what that looks like. It's not that every letter isn't connected, it's just that every once in a while, we're going to omit that connection. So let's say maybe my C, no, not C and D should still connect, I think. But maybe my D ends a little bit off, and I just keep my E where it would have been. Maybe my letter F doesn't connect to my letter G. And as long as you keep the spacing the same as it would have been if you had had that letter in there, it'll look nice. So there we go. And if we did that in a word, I'm going to do that over here. Let's say I wanted to write the word sponge. Let's say we were doing the word sponge, and maybe I wanted to experiment with not connecting my P and not having a descender on my P, and maybe my N doesn't connect to my G. Looking at this as I do it, this is not a style that I would ever choose. But I just want to show you how easy it is to start playing and completely changing the look of your alphabet by changing the spacing, by changing the connections, by not having loops in some places, and playing with things like that. Again, I just wrote this word and I'm like, I would never write it that way. I really do not like the way that looks. In fact, I want to get that out of my face immediately. But the idea is I've played with it and now I know I hate that. So that's what I'm hoping that you can do too. So just for the sake of completing all of our alphabets to look totally different, I'm going to continue on with this one and play with not connecting some of my letters. Oh, I did J twice. Okay, we're going to also ignore the fact that I did J twice. Okay, so let's look at all the different alphabets now. So just to recap, tweak number 1, play with the loops. Tweak number 2, play with the spacing, the stretchiness, and the condensedness. And tweak number 3, play with the connections. With that added 2.5 of play with the angles of your letters, because that can make a huge difference too. But if you look at all of these, they look completely different just with a couple little tweaks. There's actually one other huge thing you can do to change the style of your letters, and I'm going to touch on that at the end of this video. But for now, I want to kind of talk about my recommendations on how to actually incorporate this into your style. So once you've played around with these and exaggerated a lot and played a lot and gotten a pulse on the pieces of it that you did and didn't like, I want you to make mental notes of those, or even make physical notes of those. Then you're going to incorporate one thing at a time. So next time you go to letter something, I want you to remember the way you liked to do the O with the loop and remind yourself to do that on every single O you write. Once you've successfully built that O into your muscle memory and built it into your style and you're happy with that one and you've clocked it, check, move on to another one, and so on and so on. And over time, as you notice things, not only in your own lettering, but in other people's lettering, and you start to experiment, you're gonna add them, you're gonna remove them, you're gonna build them into your repertoire, and the more you get comfortable with them, the more they're gonna just become part of your style. then I guarantee you're gonna look back in a few months and notice that your style has completely developed into something that is way more uniquely yours. This is not an all or nothing game. You don't have to see a style you like and incorporate it all overnight. Those small tweaks that you make are gonna add up over time. And this is exactly what I teach in my course and workbook all about stylizing, bouncing and stylizing, in fact. Wink, wink, I'm gonna talk about that in a second. So I'm gonna link to that down below too, but if you wanna check it out, I think it's going to be really helpful in kind of cementing all of these ideas and more. So I hope this was helpful. And like I said, there's one other huge tweak that you can make that I mentioned in this video, and that is called bounce lettering. I didn't mention it in this video because it really truly requires its own entire video, which I already have. So I'm going to link you to that video next. I think you're going to like it, and I hope to see you over there.